Thought I'd break my Summer League hat back out today. Not for any reason in particular, just because it's sweet. Welcome to the show, everybody. I'm Dan Vespers, and this is Old Man Squad Fantasy Basketball. Ooh, I got some hairs shooting out the side. My kid needs a haircut. I need a haircut. Today, we're talking the Houston Rockets, although I can feel myself getting sick, so we'll see how far we make it before the old vocal cords give out. In the meantime, please do remember to hit that like button. The subscribe button continues to go a long way towards our growth as we look at a team that made one big splash during this offseason. The Rockets went 52-30 last year. They were solid, very good defensively, very good rebounding team. Did not have consistency on offense at all. And they added one of the most consistent offensive players in the history of basketball, and that is Kevin Durant. And that is where we will begin today's show. We'll be talking about 6 players on the Rockets that I think are relevant. There's actually a 7th relevant for what he does to the rest of the players on this team. So let's start with KD. Kevin Durant in a different uniform, coming off a season last year. We played 62 games. He was number 11 in 9 category leagues, despite kind of a relatively, for him, high turnover number. Not that it's not like on the high-ish side, but 3.1 when the assists were at 4.2 was not my favorite for KD, because he's had some years where he was at 3.5 turnovers, but he was closer to 6 assists those years. And just overall, the usage was much, much higher. This past season, the assists were not high enough. Frankly, the usage as a whole wasn't high enough to account for the turnover situation. He's a pretty good defensive stats guy, has been basically throughout his career. He'll get you over a block a game. He'll get you pretty close to a steal per game as well. The only thing I would worry about when I look at Kevin Durant going into this coming season is that he has put a lot of miles on that automobile, and he's coming off another year where he had to play close to 37 minutes per game. That said, he's had seasons in his NBA career where he played more like 34 or 35 minutes and still put up really good fantasy numbers. So even if the Rockets manage to keep some of that stuff in check, I still think this is going to be a really good year. One of the biggest reasons to me that this is going to be a strong year for Kevin Durant is, and now I have to realize I have to move my head out of the way for YouTubers to see this thing, is that he's going to a place in Houston that traded away their top usage guy to get him. The other reason that's important, as you look at where he's coming from, is that he wasn't the highest usage player on the Phoenix Suns. It was Devin Booker. Booker took 1 more shot per game, had 3 more assists, and took more free throws. Like, across the board, Booker was a higher usage player than KD this past year. That's not to say that one guy was better at basketball than the other. He just did more. Booker did. KD goes to Houston, where he is the unfettered number 1. If you're just going on usage rate alone, and Basketball Monster shows that on their player rank page, I've advocated for you guys having that page up at all times when you can. Jalen Green was at 27.5. Alperen Sengun was at 26. Freddie VanVleet was all the way down at 18 this past year, with Tari Eason, Amen Thompson, all those guys were down around 18. The Phoenix Suns, remember, by the way, that Jalen Green is gone. Dylan Brooks was around 18 also. And, of course, he went with Jalen Green the other way. Sengun at 26, which is high-ish. Like, that's a pretty good number there. But, again, we're talking about Booker near 30. Kevin Durant almost right behind him at 29. The fact that, and Beal was at 22 last year and change. I was ahead of him. So however you cut this thing up, there's more available in Houston than there was in Phoenix. Yeah, there are more guys in Houston, so that's the only thing you point. You're like, well, Dan, there were like a total of 3 guys that did anything for the Phoenix Suns this last year. That's true. Once you got underneath Beal, no one really was particularly involved, at least consistently, on the offensive side. Tyus Jones was probably the closest thing because he was around for most of the year, and then he got kind of bumped to the periphery as the season went on. Yes, with Houston, like after you get past Şengün, there's a pretty big fall off to the Eason, Freddie VanVleet, Amen Thompson group. But Amen is, first of all, he's probably going to do a little bit more. But also, again, you have to think about it from the perspective of, is it additive or is it more hierarchical? And I believe it's more hierarchical. That is, like, when you're the number one guy, you take your chunk, and it doesn't really matter how much the number 4 guy got. But the number 4 guy on Houston did more than the number 4 guy on Phoenix. But the numbers 1 and 3 guys in Phoenix did more than the numbers 2 and 3 guys in Houston, which is sort of where the pie is getting split. So I think there's a possibility that KD actually sees more usage this coming year in Houston because VanVleet is not a guy who controls things. And then Thompson's going to do stuff, but he doesn't control things. Şengün, yeah, the offense runs through him pretty often. But my guess is, if anything, he gives up a little bit of that to Kevin Durant, or it holds about the same. So now, if KD has 3 turnovers a game, I think you're looking at a guy that's going to be pretty easily over 27 points per game. The rebounds should hold. The steals, the block should hold. Maybe it comes down a little bit if the minutes come down. On top of all of this, my last note on why Kevin Durant might have an even better year is that we've seen him many times in his career shoot up around 90% at the free throw line, and he was at 84 this last season. 86 the year before that, 83 after he got traded to Phoenix. It was like he couldn't shoot free throws the way he normally would in Phoenix. These are 3 of the worst free throw shooting years of Kevin Durant's career, and they came bing, bang, boom, one right after the other in Phoenix. Is he getting worse at foul shooting? I'm inclined to say no, because he was shooting 93% with the Nets before he got sent to the Suns that year. I mean, guys don't just get bad at foul shooting overnight. If he's suddenly happy again, or whatever you want to say, like, we could be looking at a massive resurgence here for Kevin Durant. Bet Online. You know what time it is. Got to get that in before we get to the rest of the list today. Bet Online is your number one source for sports betting action. Baseball in full swing. Football season's right around the corner. And Bet Online has more ways to stay in on the action with the latest odds, news, scores, and even live in-game betting. Baseball, UFC, tennis, international basketball, WNBA, NFL futures, and more. Plus, in between games, head to the Bet Online Casino, which, by the way, I actually find fun, but I'm also a little bit of a casino file. They've got poker, they've got blackjack, they've got a live casino, and if you head to Bet Online today, you can take advantage of the industry-leading VIP program with level-up bonuses and weekly cash boosts. Bet Online, the game starts here. Next name I want to talk about is a fun one, and that is Amen Thompson. By the way, I'm a big fan of what Houston. I think Houston's going to have a great year. Health dependent, but I think Houston's going to have a really good year. Amen Thompson is coming off a brilliant season. He was number 54 on the entirety of the year in 9-Cat. Over the second half of this season, he was number 22 in 9-Cat. And if we just look at those 35 games, he was around 16, 9, and 5 with 3.2 defensive stats, 56, 67 splits. Yeah, the free throw is not exactly what you want, but everything else was very impressive. Minus the fact that he can't shoot. He doesn't need to so far. Of course, that also pulls into the idea, the notion of, could Amen Thompson get better over the offseason? He could. I can't definitively say that he's going to become a shooter in one offseason, but he might get a little bit better. In any case, despite the fact that the Rockets signed Dorian Finney-Smith, who was, by the way, that's the guy that I mentioned as relevant, but we're not going to talk about him today. I do think Dorian Finney-Smith is going to kind of chip away at a bunch of the other guys on this Rockets team, but I don't think Amen Thompson is going to be one of those dudes necessarily. Just from watching his ascendance and how good he looked in the playoffs and how good the Rockets know he is, to me, it feels like there are 4 guys that are kind of immune to depth stuff on the Rockets. Those four guys are Alperen Şengün, Freddie VanVleet, Amen Thompson, and obviously Kevin Durant. But Thompson was the one that wasn't immune to it last year. I just think that he is now. Even though the Rockets, by all accounts, have kind of the same number of quote-unquote rotation guys, they replaced Jalen Green and Dillon Brooks with Kevin Durant and Dorian Finney-Smith. So same number of guys that are expected to get minutes. I think the order of who's important changed, though, where Dillon Brooks was higher on the pecking order, at least for a while, even than Amen Thompson, and so was Jalen Green. And now the guys coming in, Kevin Durant is, but I don't think Dorian Finney-Smith is. I'd be more worried about Dorian Finney-Smith when we get to the two last guys we're going to talk about on today's show, and we'll just tease that here before we get back into the Amen Thompson thing. Thompson is amazing. I don't have a clue where he's going to get drafted this year because enough of us are fantasy nut jobs that we saw the slowish start to the year when he was the sixth man and the Rockets were fully healthy, and also saw when Freddie VanVleet went down for 5 weeks or whatever it was, and Tari Eason was in and out of the lineup, and Jabari Smith Jr. went down for a bunch of time. I forget he missed 25 games this season. Tari Eason missed 25 games. Freddie VanVleet missed 22. All those things opened, like the door opened a little bit, and Thompson jumped up into the 75 range, and the door opened a little more, and then he was top 50, and the door opened all the way, and he was second rounder. I don't think he goes into this coming year with the freedom to go second round value right out of the gate. But man, there are a lot of ways to see him getting there. Even at the very, 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 very bitter end of the season, when the Rockets regulars were mostly back, Thompson didn't really slow down. Now, some of that was an absurd number of steals and blocks, and that'll happen down the stretch because you play against a bunch of teams that are running out 5 rookies and 3 guys from the G League, and they turn the ball over a lot. But like last 10 games of the year, Jabari Smith Jr., Dillon Brooks, Tari Eason, Alperen Şengün, Freddie VanVleet, those guys were all healthy for those games for the most part. I think they might have missed 2 or 3 each or something as they were resting guys. And Thompson was a turn value guy. He was basically a first rounder. He was number 13, so we're hair splitting a little bit, on averages of 14, 7, and 5 with 3.6 defensive stats. So yeah, that fluctuation from, top 30 to top 15 was pretty heavily on the shoulders of an extra combined steal and block per game to go from mid-2s on that to mid-3s. That's a big jump. We've talked about how getting into the elite category in any category really rockets you up the board in fantasy because of how powerful that sort of standard deviation or more becomes. And that's what he did, becoming sort of super elite in steals and elite in blocks. It's hard to have a low rank when that happens. But let's say, just sort of play it conservatively, what if he did the same stuff down the stretch, 14, 7, and 5, but the steals and blocks were more like 2.6 instead of 3.6? Where does that put him? It actually puts him pretty damn close to his overall season numbers, which was 14, 8, and 4 with 2.7 defensive stats, slightly lower field goal percent, so that didn't have quite as positive an impact. And then obviously the assist was a little bit lower, and that put him at number 54. So if we're going to guess, if we're going to try to make an educated stab at what Amen Thompson will be this year, probably better than that. That was in 32 minutes a game, though, so the opportunity was there. But I don't know that we can say definitively that when the Rockets are fully healthy, he's just going to come firing out as a second rounder. I think there's a very good shot he's a 4th rounder when the Rockets are healthy, 4th or 5th. And every time one guy misses a game, literally any player in the starting 5 is out besides Thompson, he probably goes an extra round and a half higher. So if Freddie VanVleet takes a game off, great. That's more orchestrating, starting. Alperen Şengün misses a game. They run big. That's probably more big man stats. Kevin Durant misses a game. That's just more shots for everybody. And this is going to happen because VanVleet is not a young guy and Kevin Durant is old as dirt. I love him. I think he's going to have a great year, but he's old. So Amen Thompson is probably going to get drafted in the 3rd round this year, if I had to guess. I think. I'm hesitant to take him at the beginning of the 3rd. I am open, lightly open, to going late 3rd on Thompson. I think that's an okay play because you sort of build in a little bit of the upside. But you also have to be ready for him to maybe not be there when the season starts. Alperen Sengun is the next name on our board today, and Sengun is what we said he was, which is a very, very good offensive basketball player with a really fun fantasy game, minus one very large problem, and that is he takes a lot of free throws, but he doesn't make that many of them. It is what it is. You're getting a whole host of big man stats. You're getting scoring, you're getting rebounding. You're not getting a ton of blocks, but you're getting some. You're getting steals. You're getting an okay field goal percent. I'd like that to be a little bit better, frankly, this coming season. That was, I think, a little bit of a letdown because he was at 55 and 54% last year and the year before, and he dropped back down to 50 this year, despite not really dramatically changing his shot profile. I think it's pretty fair, and I will keep the Sengun handicap somewhat brief on today's show. I think he's going to replicate last year, where the upside is a slightly better field goal percent. Because he probably does about the same amount. He's going to be the number 2 option. Again, he was the number 2 option last year. Should have been the number 1, but he was number 2 behind Jalen Green. He'll be number 2 behind Kevin Durant. I see no reason to make large shifts to what he's been doing. You only hope that maybe the free throw number could get a little better, but we're 4 years into this thing, and it's changed not at all. Literally has not changed. He's been between 69 and 71% every year. Like, it's actually quite hard to be that consistent at the foul line, and he's been basically that consistent. There's a 2% window. I mean, yeah, it could get better. It could, but we've seen no signs that it is. So if you're drafting Sengun and you're punting free throws, he still went actually a tiny bit early this year. Punt free throw play, he was number 44 this last year, a little bit earlier than that in 8-cat. But mostly he was getting drafted like early 3rd, mid 3rd in a lot of drafts. And to me, that was too early. I still think that's too early. If you're not punting free throws, I probably would just steer clear because you can get, I don't want to say similar stats, but you can get a player that's not going to put a dent into something you're trying to win, where he's going to get drafted. But again, if you're punting free throws, my guess is he probably gets drafted around where he belongs this year after getting a little hot air under the tushy last season that pushed him up the board too far. This year, he probably slides back down more into a more predictable spot. Freddie VanVleet, who was arguably my biggest miss this last season. He could not shoot. Couldn't shoot to save his life. The other stuff in his game slipped a bit as well, but the biggest thing was effectively a career worst free throw year. I know his rookie season he shot 35%, but there was no volume there. Since he became a regular in the NBA, this is his worst shooting year. I would almost say by far, but it's really by 1 full percentage point, but that's a lot. So yeah, you can point to the usage rate going down. That was problematic this season. He was unhealthy, and the guys on his team that had the highest usage were healthy. Jalen Green was healthy. Alperen Sengun was healthy this last year. It was the other guys that missed time. So there was never an opportunity for Freddie VanVleet to be kind of more of a lead horse the way he was for stretches the prior year. He's agreed to come back. He's back on a lower contract value to make a run at it with a team that has KD now. So I think you're probably looking at a dude who's going to do similar stuff. I think there's also a possibility that Amen Thompson, as he continues to improve, that could also take a little more off of Freddie VanVleet's plate, but it would be hard to take much more away than what we had this time around. I mean, this was This was ugly. He didn't shoot the ball well from three. He didn't shoot the ball well at the free throw line, which is normally one of his big positives. He just had a year where he couldn't put a basketball through a hoop. So to me, that stuff probably comes back, which is good because, he was a late 6th, early 7th rounder this year that was getting drafted in the 3rd. He's probably going to get drafted 6th, 7th round range. And I don't know how he could possibly shoot worse. Even if he's a small tick better, he comes flying back in value because the same way we talked about having a category where you're hyper elite at it, having a category where you are hyper bad at it has an equally large negative swing. If you put Freddie VanVleet's numbers across the board here and you adjust his field goal percent up by 2 and his free throw percent up by, I don't know, what can we safely assume happens next year? 4% better? Like, he'd never been worse. He'd never been this bad. 3-4% better? First of all, that would give him more scoring and more threes. So, yes, there's some other stuff built into that. But if all you're adjusting is the percentages for Freddie VanVleet, he probably jumps a round to 2 rounds. Like, he probably jumps back near top 50 without anything else changing. So as much as he was a disaster this past season, I actually think Freddie VanVleet might end up being a value this year. And I understand if you guys don't want to get on that boat with me, because it's a boat that is getting old. It's an old boat. And yet, I think there's an assumption that the boat is older than it is. He's not a young dude. He's 31, but he's not like he's 37. Like, he should be able to just play the way he's been playing. And, you're going to get 6-ish assists out of a guy that you might be able to get in the 70s. I think I'm in on 70s Freddie VanVleet. I know, fool me once, shame on you, fool me twice, shame on me, and all that stuff, but whatever, here we are. Okay, last 2 names on the board are 2 guys that, we'll start with Jabari Smith Jr., 2 guys that are going to be negatively impacted by Dorian Finney-Smith, who it looked like were in line to have a much better fantasy season and now probably aren't anymore. I would say they're not going to be useful, but I don't think they're going to get better. So Jabari Smith Jr. was someone that I faded this past year. I thought he was sort of like a relatively boring, just outside top 100 kind of play, and it ended up much worse than that. He was the guy who suffered with the ascendance of Amen Thompson and the improvement of Tari Eason, who's the other guy we're about to discuss. I don't think, by the way, I do think Jabari Smith Jr. is still going to start. My guess on the Rockets starting 5, but Dorian might take his spot, is we talked about the 4 guys already that are pretty well locked in: KD, Thompson, Şengün, and VanVleet. I'm guessing that Jabari Smith Jr. is the last guy on that board, but it could be Dorian Finney-Smith. Either way, there's just not enough stuff to do. There is a path for both of those guys. I mean, Tari Eason was great this past year. Kind of specialist style appeal, but not quite. There's a path for Jabari Smith Jr. to have value. That path is getting about an extra shot to shot and a half per game. Defensive stats must be better. He was at 1.1 this year after 1.5 last season and 1.4 his rookie year. So that 1.1 has to get back to 1.4 or 1.5. Field goal percent, I hope, can tick up to 45 or 46. And if you got all of that and he continues to play 30-plus minutes per game, you could get him around the edge of the top 100. Because remember, Jabari Smith Jr. was like right on the cusp of being fantasy interesting, not this past season, but the prior one. He was number 90. That is startable in all formats. Yeah, a lot of things kind of had to break the right way, but he could get back to that. It's not out of the question, but I also don't think it's going to get any better than that. Like a best case scenario, it seems like for Jabari Smith, and this is when the Rockets are healthy, I guess, is 11 shots per game, sort of 14, 8, and assists don't really matter. Little under 2 3-pointers, 1.5 combined defensive stats, low 80s in free throw percent. That's what he did, not this year, but the prior year. That got him just inside the top 100. Would I draft Jabari Smith Jr. if he's hanging around at like pick 150? I mean, probably. Odds are he won't be, and the other guys that are going in that range are going to be pretty clunky. But I mean, I'd rather take Tari Eason in that spot. If we're looking at, again, like just in your mind, say, okay, the Rockets are replacing Jalen Green and Dillon Brooks with Kevin Durant and Dorian Finney-Smith. Those guys, no matter how much Kevin Durant does, those guys are probably not going to do as much combined on offense as Jalen Green and Dillon Brooks did. Dillon Brooks was 12 shots. Jalen Green was 17 and a half. That's close to 30. Kevin Durant last year, as we mentioned, was 18. Dorian Finney-Smith was almost a negligible number. He took 7, I think, with the Lakers. Or less than that with the Lakers. I mean, 7 overall. So even if Kevin Durant took 22 shots, they still would only be matching the Jalen Green, Dillon Brooks output from last year. So if you're thinking about it from an offensive standpoint, you hope that means Jabari Smith Jr. can be a little bit better than last year. Is he going to be good enough to get back to top 90? Questionable. To me, that still feels like a nice end point. Could Tari Eason replicate what he did last year? I'm also inclined to say yes, because from a minutes standpoint, things don't change all that much. Dorian Finney-Smith probably going to play fewer minutes than Dillon Brooks did this last year, which was 32. KD probably plays maybe 1-2 minutes more than Jalen Green, who was at 33. But like, it kind of feels like a worst case scenario for handicapping the Rockets is it's the same. Like, let's say KD plays 35, Dorian Finney-Smith would have to play 30 for the minutes to balance out also. By the way, Rockets also got rid of Cam Whitmore this offseason for whatever that's worth. I don't think it's worth all that much. Those minutes probably don't go back to the heavy use guys. So I think Jabari Smith Jr., who you're still looking at on your YouTube screen right now, probably a like high floor, low ceiling, ultra late head-to-head kind of play where you figure you can just sort of accrue just snowball stats throughout the year. Not much upside appeal. So games cap roto, I don't know that it's worth taking a swing on him. The way that things break right for Jabari Smith is if like 2 other wings get hurt. Meanwhile, as we flash Tari Eason up on the screen now, he has a more translatable 9-cat fantasy game because his defensive stats are big. Tari Eason was at 2.6 defensive stats last year in 25 minutes per game. We saw the trust in Tari kind of go down in the playoffs, which is a little bit of a concern. That perhaps Dorian Finney-Smith pushes his way ahead of him. But Tari Eason was already kind of the last man in the pecking order that we just talked about. Of the 6 Rockets that I've mentioned on this show, the 4, 5 now, including Eason, well, KD was not a Rocket, so 4 plus Eason. Jalen Green, Dillon Brooks being the other ones. Eason had the fewest number of minutes of any of those guys last year. Minutes per game was Jalen Green at the top. No, Freddie VanVleet was at the top. He played 35 minutes a game last year. Apologies. Then Jalen Green, Amen Thompson, Şengün, Jabari Smith Jr. Did I say Dillon Brooks? He's in there. Dillon Brooks, Tari Eason. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. That was 7 actually last year. Did I do 7 people and not realize it? Yeah, it was 5 plus 2. Whoopsies. Wait, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Yeah, 7. I said 6. It was actually 7. No, it's 6. It was 6. Okay, doesn't matter. Daniel can't count. Point is, if we're looking at from those same general names, which last year was Brooks, Jabari Smith, Jalen Green, Şengün, VanVleet, Tari Eason, Amen Thompson, that is 7 names, but nobody cared about Dillon Brooks from a fantasy standpoint. Tari Eason played the lowest number of minutes of any of those guys. So even if that happens again this year, where you replace Dillon Brooks and Jalen Green with Durant and Dorian Finney-Smith, Eason still only needs, 23 minutes to be fantasy relevant. So to me, he's a guy you do definitely need to look at. The injury stuff is a concern. So if you're thinking head-to-head, you probably got to go a little bit later. Games cap roto, because of the upside, he's a guy you're looking at probably as like a 10th rounder. I don't think I would go 9th. I think you still got guys there that are more healthy and have kind of equivalent upside. But once you get past about pick 110, then you take a shot on that type of guy. And we'll see if he goes earlier than that. We'll have to recalibrate if he does. But I think Tari Eason belongs on fantasy rosters this year. Even if you look at the team like, oh, they just got, they got more wingy. Yeah, that's true. But someone's just going to get pushed down a rung. Probably Amen Thompson. What the Rockets don't have is proper floor spacing. Because they sent out the two guys that made the most three-pointers on the team, and they brought back one, like KD, who's not he's a great three-point shooter, but doesn't take that many of them. And the Dorian Finney-Smith, who, he can space the floor a little bit, but he's not a guy that's going to create from out there. And that's one reason why I wonder if DFS does start kind of pushing ahead of some of these other guys. But I do still think Tari Eason can get his 24, 25 minutes, and for that reason, you should probably have him on your roster. Them's the Rockets. I think they're in business. I think the Rockets are going to have a great year. I'm sure there's going to be a little bit of a learning curve at the front end, but KD's so damn good on offense that usually shortens it up a little bit, especially when you've got a team where everybody can defend like a you-know-what. I mean, they're going to be defending the crap out of the ball. They lost Dylan Brooks, but like Dorian Finney-Smith is a great defender. Jalen Green was a fine defender. KD is too. They're still going to play good defense. They're still going to rebound. And now they've got Kevin Durant. So I don't know. I think the transition is going to be relatively smooth because they weren't winning games with offense anyway. Thanks for watching, everybody. That's the Rockets. That's your week. Back next week. We'll keep working our way through this Southwest. See you then. Subscribe.